But the thing that Christy and I watched in our downtime, this Goop series on Netflix called Sex, Love, and Goop.
I've seen the trailer.
So, of course, Goop is the Gwyneth Paltrow. It's not just wellness. It's all types of stuff, and it's what
just Gwyneth stuff.
Years ago, she got flack for like saying, "Oh, put this egg in your vagina for a long time," and
jade egg,
the jade egg, and
you named your dog after it.
She got a lot of pushback for stuff like that, and she did a mini series, a Goop series on Netflix like a year ago. That was a bunch of like, I don't know, you spend a lot of money on something that's very questionable. It seems like that's kind of the reputation with like, what she's putting out into the world. But this new series, she's not really the center of it. And we watched the whole thing while we were there, and that's my recommendation. But I wanted to talk through some of this stuff with you because it's basically episodic series, like docu-series on sexual healing of real life couples paired with a sexologist.
Mm-hmm. Is that a sex therapist?
I would have called him a sex therapist, but they're
sexologist sounds more sciencey.
Sexologist. Wanted to jump in here and give a clarification. This is after recording everything that you're currently listening to. We had a discussion about Goop in light of the fact that a lot of controversy came to light after we recorded me talking about that Goop series. And the controversy is nothing new to Goop, but I just wanted to say there's certain therapeutic practices that are platformed in the series that people are pointing out are illegal in most states, highly questionable. The one that I know about specifically is not one that I'm telling you about in this episode.
Right.
But in general, I just wanted to say, I'm not endorsing any of these practices. I don't know enough to do that. And I hope you know enough to like use your own judgment. I'm basically just saying this was a fascinating show to watch and be exposed to. And it just got me thinking about some things that I'm not saying are entirely right or even entirely legal because I don't know. So I'm just putting that out there and framing this whole conversation with caution that you need to be responsible for yourself and how you apply any of the stuff from that series, if at all. No endorsements.
And I'll add that if you didn't already know, Goop is not, it doesn't necessarily have the reputation for being the most reliable or evidence-based source of lifestyle and health advice. There's a number of things that have come up in the past few years, but we are entertained by the way that they go about things. So again, whatever Link said, I agree with. This is not an endorsement. We were entertained by this thing, but because of this recent controversy.
Whatever I said? You weren't listening to what I said?
No.
Okay, he agrees with what I said.
But we just want,
he endorses my non-endorsement.
That we know how the internet is, and we know that when you talk about something that's controversial, people assume that is an endorsement, and we wanted to confirm that it is not an endorsement.
Now let's go back to it. And so these are real people who like, from all walks of life. You got old people, you got a lesbian couple, you got people dealing with challenges in being intimate, or like there being a mismatch in what drives them. And then, so it's kind of like seeing the therapeutic techniques that they're experiencing firsthand. And sometimes with multiple hands involved, as I'll get to. And it gets wild and really out there in a couple of key places, one that I'll tell you about. But I really enjoyed the heart behind this thing. I mean, Christy recommended it. And said, hey, let's watch this thing. And I thought, okay, this will be fun. This might make us horny. That's what I was thinking. But then it was actually very eye-opening and educational. Some people might describe parts of it as pornographic, and it might make you uncomfortable. But if you've been through Sextember, I think you probably be ready to check this thing out. But I give it to these couples who are like totally normal people with normal problems in their relationships, and they're like super vulnerable in the stuff that they were asked to do on camera. But one of the things that one of these sexologists talked about was an erotic blueprint test that determines the way in which you best receive pleasure. And this is something that like, I was able to connect a few dots with this, but I had not heard about it.
It's like a love language for sex?
Yeah, so the different erotic blueprints are energetic, sensual, sexual, kinky, or shapeshifter. So energetic means you're aroused by anticipation and yearning. So it's like, it's not what is happening, it's what's about to happen. Like
foreplay.
Am I ready for this? And it's foreplay, but then sometimes it goes into more of this like woo energy thing, which I'll talk about. Second one is sensual, so you're turned on when all the senses are ignited. Ever how many there are? 5 or 6?
Like the vagina scented candle. That
Yeah,
she sold
so like
for a while.
sight, smell, touch. What are the other ones? Rubbing, insertion. Sounds.
Taste.
The next one is sexual, which is excited by nudity and or other traditional sexual characteristics. A lot of this is associated with the sexy bits, you know?
Okay.
The parts that you're supposed to cover up on.
Like the ankles.
To be decent. Angles?
Ankles. I'm really into ankles.
No, I'm talking about the twigs, the berries.
Yeah.
The
Tunnel of love.
The nappy dugout.
Yeah.
As Ice Cube called it in something. So, and that's the one that you tend to think about, like, okay, when sexual stuff is what is at play when you're activated sexually.
Yep.
But only that stuff. Kinky, aroused by taboo.
Mm-hmm.
And then shapeshifter is just all of the above.
Yeah.
So Christian, I mean, it's not a teaching series. It's more like they're sharing this with the people in order so that this one particular couple could understand how kind of like a love language thing. How do they like meet each other's expectations? And like, she's putting one of them on a table and then it's like, okay, based on your survey, you're kinky. And she's like, oh, I am. And then he like gets out, the sexologist gives her partner a paddle and he's like,
I'm not kinky. I'm just a high school principal.
He was, his eyebrows are going up all the time as he's like trying to like figure out how hard does she like to be spanked with this paddle.
Right.
And then there's like the whips and the thing, like the big thing with the chains hanging from it. And it's like, well, you don't whip the person with this, you just slowly drape it on them and drape it on her crotch. And then you have the weight of these chains.
Just the feeling of chains.
Is, I think she was like sensual and kinky, if I remember correctly. But then they switch up and they put him on the table. And
I'm a golfer.
And he wasn't like that, but like, I mean, they gave him like Wolverine claws to like start scratching down her body and like a very, no blood was drawn.
Right, yeah.
It was very approachable. It made kinky approachable.
So you're a big Wolverine fan.
It did make me think that I was a shapeshifter because no matter what I saw, I wanted to try.
I could try that.
But they put
that feels like the page I'm on so far, yeah.
They put him on the table and then the sexologist is like, you are an energetic. And then they started like talking about like, put your hands over the person. Do you feel the energy? And I'm like, okay, here we go. I don't believe in any of this shit. But then he started being touched in a way that the dude had what is called an energetic orgasm.
He came in his pants without being touched.
He had I don't know if he ejaculated in his britches.
Well, that's an orgasm.
But his whole body was shaking. He was like, he started crying. Huh. It was wild. It really was wild. And I didn't know this was a thing. And then they're like, okay, yeah, this is what you are and this is what.
What happened though? Just hand placement without touching?
Honestly, I can't remember all the specifics of what they did to him. Maybe it was because
nothing was vibrating, like under the table that we couldn't see.
Nothing that I saw. You'll have to watch it for yourself if you want to really, I can't remember the specifics of what they did. It was more about the result and him knowing that this was his sexual love language, his erotic blueprint. But then the sexologist is like, now you get off, now let me show you where you can go with this, basically. Since this is a way that you're able to get off and you guys can learn that from each other.
Go stand next to a transformer?
just sit here and watch me. And then the sexologist lays down on the table, fully clothed.
Uh-oh.
And she's like, I'd like to introduce you to my business and life partner. And this middle-aged bald dude comes out and he looks like he's got like a golf shirt on. I don't remember what he had on.
What was his name?
I don't remember like Raymond or something like that. It was but he looked like an evil Bond villain. I wouldn't say that his head was bulbous, but it was bald, and all of his facial features were kind of concentrated on the lower half of his face.
It's better that way.
So it was kind of
that
like
way you can see, smell, and taste things that are all at the same time.
And he had a smirk, but he didn't really talk. And then all of a sudden, he starts putting his hands over his partner, and he never, ever touched her.
It's like David Copperfield.
And it was kind of like this super villain magician type thing, and he had one hand. It was kind of, when in Lord of the Rings, when Sauron kind of like put his hand over the Palantir and his hand was like, it was kind of like he was drawing a connection with Sauron out of that crystal ball. Yeah. And like his fingernails and his hand was like getting like twiggy. It was like weird and like
that happened sinuous. On Netflix?
Like this dude, well, what he did was he did that with his hand above her head. And then
she got her eyes closed?
Kind of over her crotch.
Uh-oh, puppeteer.
And he looked like he was pulling on strings like a freaking puppeteer. And then she is just going crazy. Like she is undulating, having a full body orgasm all over this table.
All over the table?
Like she was writhing all over the table, moaning and arching her back and putting her knees in the air and throwing her legs all over the place. And he was never touching her, but doing this thing that, from my perspective, it was an elaborate performance.
Well,
I think so.
Having not seen it,
it was wild. I didn't really buy it, but the other guy totally bought.
Well, here's the thing. You ever, like, this hasn't happened to me recently, but I've done it with my kids where you'll like, you're
doing it with your kids.
You're tickling your kids, and then you've got them held down, and then you get really close to tickle them, and they laugh, because it's the anticipation of getting tickled. Like I think,
and they would call that an energetic response.
I think that it is. Listen, I don't know. I don't claim to know things about metaphysical things anymore. That's kind of where I'm at. But the idea that there's literally like some energy field that he's kind of running through her vagina and then coming out on the top of her head and like literally like, what was the guy in Pinocchio?
Geppetto.
He was like Geppettoing his woman. I don't think that's what's happening, but like the idea is so powerful,
right?
And that her mind is literally able to activate a sexual response. Like I totally believe that could happen.
I agree with that, and there was no denying that this guy who was in tears and like took him hours to recover from what happened to him on the table.
Oh.
It just seemed like it was a very extreme demonstration that I don't know, the waters got kind of muddied for me, and you expect a little bit of that from a Goop thing.
Yeah, it's gotta be a little goopy. A little goopy.
You gotta get goopy.